Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is Coach Candy here with Coffee Chats, and we are going to hold to the 7:30 a.m. Central Time. I know there was some buzz around changing when we were all going to get together, but I am here, and we are going to hold this time and look for some other ways to connect as well. So good morning, Deborah. Good morning, Herbie. Cheers, everyone. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your water. Grab your juice, grab whatever it is that gets you kind of rocking and rolling in the morning. So good to be here with all of you. Like I said, we are going to say hello, hey. We are going to stay at this time. I know I was contemplating moving. I may set up another Facebook Live or another live stream at a different time so that some other people can get into conversation as well. And wanting to honor the fact that we have such a great group that is here every morning, and wanting to make sure that y'all get this space to connect with each other, to lean into the conversation, and let's just, if it's working, don't change it, right? So good morning, Yvette. Good morning, Shirley. We're going to let everybody get on here. I've got a big conversation we're going to get into today. We're going to talk about boundaries, self-worth, and codependency. And then there might be some things that while those words you're like, okay, get it. Yay! So I'm glad you're home. Glad you got some time with your dad, Yvette. Love the pictures, love the updates. I know that just filled your heart to spend some time with your daddy, and that just makes me so happy that you got that opportunity. He's amazing, and love that you got to do that. So hopefully everybody is doing well. It is Tuesday, y'all. Can you believe that? We are at episode 91. I've got a few surprises as we approach the 100th episode mark, which is just insane to me. I can't believe we've been here doing this. We've had our conversations almost every morning, aside from when I've been traveling or a few other things. But amazing to see y'all. Yeah, I bet it was. I can't even imagine. So awesome. So like I said, we're going to have some big discussion this morning, just see if anybody else is jumping on here, because we're going to get into a big discussion around boundaries, self-worth, and codependency. And one of the things I want you to think about is, as those words kind of show up, we all have different kind of connotations or triggers or things that we're like, oh, boundaries, oh, codependency, oh, whatever. I want to shed some light on some things that maybe you're not aware of. You're creating those codependent areas in your life. It's not always with people, and so I want to make sure that we're clear on that. That's always good when your heart's full. That's the way our life should be, right? Our heart should be full and overflowing every day. So once again, everybody, welcome. We are going to jump in here just in a moment, as I see lots of people jumping on this morning. We got a nice full house today. So as people are jumping on, as they are here, let's get rocking and rolling. So like I said, I want to talk a little bit about personal boundaries and how it connects to your own self-worth and why it connects to your own self-worth, and then where we are creating these links of codependency and what that really means as well. And so what triggered this was, of course, my girl, Brene Brown. I came across a quote where she's talking about boundaries. And so I want to start with that as we get into our discussion this morning. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And I want you to let that sit in for just a moment. I'm going to say that again. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing each other or disappointing others. And so what I want you to think about is, when you set boundaries, you are more than likely going to disappoint others. There was a really great, and I will put the link in. Actually, I can do it right now. Let me grab it, because I want you to have this link. I will drop it into the thread right now, because there is a great, it's about 20 minutes long. I've actually shared it with some of my clients, and y'all know I love me some Brene and I love me some Oprah. Well, typically when Brene and Oprah get together, it's Oprah interviewing Brene on Super Soul Sunday, and it's their conversation. This is an opportunity where the role is reversed, right? So it's an opportunity where Brene Brown is interviewing Oprah on the Living Brave series. And it's really powerful. One of the things I love about this is it's really transparent. It's really wide open and vulnerable. And you've got two people who are iconic, right? Who are sitting there creating these massive movements and opportunity. And sometimes we forget that they're still human as well. So I love that there's such a human element to this. I love anytime the two of them get together. It's just wide open and raw. And what I love about it is there's a part in there where Oprah is talking about you will absolutely disappoint people if you're setting clear boundaries for yourself. When you get really clear about who you are, when you get clear about owning your own worth, and you start creating boundaries, which I'm going to define in just a moment what I mean by that. When you start to create boundaries and non-negotiables for yourself, you absolutely will disappoint people. And it's similar to Brene Brown talking about when you get in the arena, you're going to get your ass handed to you. It's just the way it is. And so I love that, and I highly encourage you to go out and watch that this morning. It's one of the most powerful interviews, in my opinion, again, because it's so wide open and raw, and it's two women who have created these massive influence in the world and are continuing to build those platforms and that movement and things around that. And here they are wide open, almost, they're extremely naked in their vulnerability. And it's a space where they can, good morning, Terry, good morning, Robin. Ooh, I love everybody jumping on this morning. And so I highly encourage that you go out and watch that clip. First of all, like I said, I love it because it's flipped. It's one of the few instances where you see Oprah being interviewed instead of being the interviewer. And the conversation that they have about boundaries, about being in the arena, about being wide open and vulnerable, about living a brave life is really powerful, and it plays into some of what I want to say today. And so for some of you joining this morning, let's see, Herbie, for me, the disappointment comes from not having the why. Once we discussed, I was able to understand, accept, and agree for the needed boundary. Yeah, it's really important. You need to understand why things matter to you. You need to understand who you are. And so in order to set appropriate boundaries, you really do have to have a sense of who you are, your own self-worth. You need to understand what you authentically need. What's your purpose? What's your mission? And that happens not by seeking out, as we've talked about before. It's not an external game in any way, shape, or form. It's a dropping in and really getting into your intuition, into your space. Your purpose is who you are. It's not something that you go out and seek and find. And so to Herbie's point, when you get into a space and you understand that why, when you can drop in and really align and let it settle in into a space to understand this is who I am and this is why this matters. This is the work that I want to do and this is why it matters. And a lot of times it's the why behind the why, right? It's that space of, sometimes we think we've got this why and it sounds kind of esoteric and it sounds very elusive and it sounds very, awesome. And when you peel back many layers of the why and you get into the why behind the why, there's usually a deeper, visceral space that's connected to things that you've experienced in life. It's connected to things that have been your trials, your tribulations, your challenges. And when you get into your deep why, it's a need for security or love or different things that when you can articulate that, when you can drop in and allow yourself to lean into that, you can start to establish boundaries that are going to create the right container, create the right space to allow you to step into your light and shine it in its full awesomeness, and create that space of knowing your why. And so Herbie's really, hitting on such a great point. We've got to take the time, and I'm going to be doing another free webinar here next week on stop looking for your why. For those of you that missed it before, I'm going to do a replay and go live. I haven't figured out what night, so stay tuned. But the fact that we need to stop looking for our why, we need to know that we are our why, and it's that space that's deep within us, right? So here, let's talk about boundaries a little bit. Let's talk about what that means. Herbie, the vulnerability to open up and share what is needed took a lot of courage to have it articulated, and on the other side of that space builds a great bond and trust. Absolutely. It's extremely scary to have ourselves be wide open and naked in that vulnerability. And it's absolutely necessary if we want to live our most amazing life, if we want to have any chance of having that deep fulfillment and joy, which resonates in our heart and our soul. We have to be able to get into a place where we can articulate what we need and what's a non-negotiable for us. So as I talk about boundaries, here's some definitions that I was able to pull that I want you to think about for a moment, because boundaries have some different context different meaning depending on the context that we're putting them in. So first and foremost, a boundary, and just its generic general definition from Webster's, is a real or imagined line that marks the edge or limit of something. So very vague statement, right? It is the real or imagined line that marks the edge or limit of something. And so I want you to think about that, right? And so the other space of And then, going to Wikipedia, because I always like more of the cultural definition. I like the way we interpret it in terms of everyday language in our environment. There's always a great way to go out and look at Webster's, or go and look at, Merriam's, or any of the other dictionaries out there, which is the formal structured way that we define a word. But I always find it interesting to go out and see how that compares to something like Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is more of a socially accepted way we see that definition. And it's not always right, don't get me wrong. And it also provides a little bit different context. And I'm going to add some different color and some context of my own, because there's some things, as I've done so much work with so many different people, I've learned about what boundaries are, what they aren't. And then we're going to talk about this codependency side of the equation, which for some people is a blind spot. Some people don't realize that they're creating codependent relationships, and it's not just with other people. It's oftentimes with themselves and what they perceive. It's the shoulding you're doing all of yourselves. It can be with your time, your calendar. It can be with other things outside of just other people. So Yvette, when I was telling you some months back about my struggles with balancing my job with the rest of my life, you said that I need to set boundaries. Magical. I had never really thought of that. Yes. And that's an example. Yvette, thank you for sharing that. That's an example that when we had that first part of that conversation, there's a codependent relationship in terms of what you think you need to sacrifice. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment. And so that space of awareness to say, oh, I don't have to give up all of myself. I don't have to deplete myself. I don't have to sacrifice myself to the level where my mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual health is at risk. This is where we need to look at the boundaries that are required in our life. It's about our own mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. And there are lines we need to create that are those edges or limits around things that are violating or taking away from what we need to fill our cup in that space. And so that is such a powerful example of where there was a codependent relationship, and creating that shift for boundaries is the way that Yvette was able to pull herself out of that. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. So let me give you another definition of personal boundaries. Personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, this is a really key word for boundaries, safe and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them, and how they will respond when someone passes those limits. So I want you to think about those words for a moment. Identify reasonable limits, the edge, safe and permissible ways for other people to behave towards you, and how you will respond when they pass those limits. And so let's talk about that for a minute. Safe and permissible. This is really, really important. And this goes back into what Herbie just said, understanding your why, understanding the essence of who you are. One person's line for safety may be, and often is, very different than someone else's line of safety. And safety is in the space of your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, and your spiritual well-being. And when you know what your lines are, your edges, in terms of where you feel safe and where you don't, you start to reclaim your own personal power and reclaim a space of ownership that's incredibly powerful. And safe is not something to dismiss. I've had so many clients in the past who, when we get to talking about what's safe for them, they're like, and they just kind of blow it off. It's a space we need to lean into, because what happens is, unless we're really clear about what's safe for us, we oftentimes allow people to cross those lines, and then there's anger, frustration, depression, there's feeling of violation, because we're not articulating what we need. I have very clear safety lines based on things that happened to me as a kid. And I'll give you an example of a very clear boundary. I was dating someone who was truly one of the best relationships I've ever been in. Such an open, loving, he's the first person I ever dated that made me realize I could love as big as I love. He loved me back that way. And there was one thing that didn't work for us, and it's why we're not together. And he's a wonderful human being. We're still friends. He's married. I just adore him and have so much love in my heart for him. And we had a very different line for me that was a safety line. And it was how to raise kids and animals. And based on the relationship I had with my dad, based on the things I experienced, based on things that are deep traumatic triggers for me, things that I've done work on, things that I've done healing on, still have helped me create a very, very hard line. There's a lot of things I'll compromise. There's a lot of things I love to see from different points of view. And there's some things that are very, very hard lines for me from a safety perspective. And this is an example of one. We got talking, and we were talking about raising kids, and he had talked about using a heavy hand. I will tell you that for me, the heavy hand, regardless of even in whatever context, a swat on the butt, whatever, is not okay for me. Physical discipline in any way, shape, or form is not okay for me. And it took me a long time to be able to say that. I don't judge other people that that's their method. I'm not about judging. I know, though, for me, because of the deep wounding, the trauma, the triggers, all of the work and the healing that I've done in that space, that is a line I absolutely cannot cross. There is no physical discipline. There is no physical monitoring of behavior that is okay for me. And that extends to animals as well. And so we had a conversation after we had split, because wasn't sure exactly why we split. We just knew something had shifted. And we got together about 2.5 months after we had broken up, and still kind of like, love this person, he loves me, how come we're not together? And when we got together to kind of exchange our stuff and see how each other was doing, we had a conversation because I was just about to get Peyton. And I remember when he said to me, he said, so you're going to get a shock collar, right? And I just remember that all of the color drained in me. I was like, absolutely not. He's like, oh, you will the first time he goes off leash and right. I'm like, no, you don't understand. There will never be a shock collar in my life. Again, no judgment for people that that's their way of training dogs. I personally have a deep core belief about that. So much so that I wouldn't be able to work for a company that was one of their products that they made, because it's so against something that's a safe space for me that I'm like, no, I don't believe in that. And actually all of the training I did with Peyton was positive clicker reinforcement training. It's just my belief. I don't judge other people in that space. And it is a very, very, very clear boundary for me from a safety perspective. Physical discipline, physical management of behavior in my world, in my mind, in my being, because of the extent of abuse that I experienced, because of what I saw my dad do to our dog, my dog, I should say, what he did to me, is absolutely a non-negotiable for me. I am so crystal clear about that it is the space where, when I remember driving away, I was bawling, and I remember praying in my car and thanking God so much for knowing that while I love this person so much, that ultimately we were not meant to be. Because when we could have that conversation and it was in a non-triggered way, 2 years, 10 years, whatever, it would have been the very crux of what would have destroyed us had we stayed in that space. And there are fundamental core values, especially from a safety perspective, when you have boundaries that are non-negotiables. And to force yourself into a space with someone else becomes a codependent relationship. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Let me see what y'all are saying, because you guys are blowing up this feed over here. Herbie, me prior to and including 2018. Absolutely. And I remember that shift for you, Herbie. It was profound. Yvette, I feel like my job was sucking the life out of me. Yes. And that in itself is a space of recognition that you have boundaries that are being violated, and or you've never gotten clear about what your boundaries are in the first place. You are not giving yourself that space of knowing your own self-worth. You are allowing other people to define that for you. And so that's a really powerful indicator that we are crossing our own boundaries, and we are handing over our personal power and letting others violate us in that space because we're not clear. We don't own who we are. We don't have a sense of self-worth, and we're not clearly communicating what we need or what we don't need. And boundaries, it becomes very important for you to say what's safe, what's not safe, what's okay and what's not okay, and stepping into that space to be able to know safety. Yes, and we all have non-negotiables where safety is concerned. Now, safety looks different for everybody. Like I said, I just shared that example and that story for me. Any kind of physical discipline in terms of correcting behavior is absolutely not okay for me. It is 1000% a boundary for me, and it is a huge safety issue and trigger for me. me. And so understanding that and recognizing that. And the thing is I don't need to stand in the space to justify that, to explain that, to apologize for that, or do anything else. I get to own it and simply say, this is my line in the sand as far as where safety is concerned. It either works for you or it doesn't. And that's the invitation you get to make to other people. When you get really clear about defining what your lines are, what those edges are, what the boundaries are, you give people permission to decide that's okay for them, or you give people permission to decide that that's not for them. And the thing is you honor and hold your boundary no matter what. Because what happens is then we creep into that codependent space, which starts to say we allow other people to decide what's safe for us or not. And we start sacrificing the very essence of what creates safety or what creates those edges and limits for ourselves. Okay, let's see. Terry, as I've launched See Me Rise, I've had to set boundaries with my mom and husband around not being negative as they talk to me about my business and not talk negatively about themselves or others when they are with me. Absolutely. That negative feel gets so easy to get sucked into. And I have very clear boundaries around that. Another space. And so Terry, I appreciate you sharing that, because we need to be very clear. Look, I'm not going to have people around me that are going to bitch and complain and blame and whine and all of these things. I don't want living, breathing crap magnets around me. I want people that are open. I want people that are expansive, people that are always contracted and always looking for someone to blame. Now, I've had some lessons in that when I've allowed those boundaries to get soft. Hence what happened in my business over the last year, and to be able to reset and say that is a non-negotiable. I know in my gut when somebody's showing up and being really contracted and has no capacity for expansion, they are not somebody that I want, and they are not somebody I'm going to participate with. And I get to choose to walk away. You get to say, when it comes to issues about race or gender or sexuality or LGBTQ issues or anything, I have absolute boundaries on things that I will not tolerate from other people. I can remember back being in college where we were in our suites at MSOE, and I had a roommate who, her boyfriend was incredibly prejudiced, and he would come into our home, into the main open area, and he would say the most hateful things. And I remember looking at him and saying, absolutely, you are not allowed to say that in my house. If you're going to speak that way, then you're going to leave. And he's like, you can't ask me to leave. This is, Lisa's place too. And I said, I absolutely can ask you to leave. This is my house, and this is our open area. And Lisa looked at him and looked at me, and she said, you know what, Candy's right. This is her space. This is her safe space, because I have no tolerance for that. And there are things that are absolute. And so to Terry's point, when there are those negative anchors, you need to get very clear about saying, no, this is not acceptable for me. And being very clear about how you expect people to show up with you, and what are the consequences if they choose not to. And some of that's just you walking away, right? You not engaging, you not participating. Yvette, yes, I've had these discussions about discipline, theoretical, because I don't have kids. There's not too much room for compromise. No, not at all. When you are very clear about your boundaries, there is no compromise. It's oftentimes your boundaries are set from your own internal moral compass. They're set from your core values. And so when you have opportunities, when you start compromising them, is you start to create this softness or this opportunity for some codependency. Terry, so glad you're focused your boundaries to adjust so your job isn't sucking the life out of you. Yes, I agree with that for Yvette. Out of you anymore. You're worth much better than that. Absolutely. Good morning, Carol. Welcome. Or even your relationships. Absolutely, 100%. Terry, still a work in progress, or Yvette to Terry, still a work in progress, but at least I've been able to verbalize it, now can work on it. Yes, and that's the beautiful thing. It's always a work in progress. It's not like we're ever done with this. And as we keep growing in our life, our boundaries get even more solidified in our non-negotiables. Because what I want you to think about for a moment, because our boundaries, the reason we need to set boundaries and the reasons we need that space that feels safe is because they're built out of a mix of conclusions, beliefs, opinions, attitudes, past experiences, and social learning. Like I said, I have some things that were traumatic experiences for me that have made it very clear what I can tolerate and what I can't. And I don't need to apologize for that. And even with all the healing in the world, that still is a space that is a non-negotiable for me. And when you get very clear on that, you get very clear on, look, if this is who I am, take me or leave me. Here is the space that I am inviting you to play in. If you choose not to, then you know what? You're not going to be in this space with me. And it's that simple sometimes, not easy, but simple. And so codependency. This is what I want you to think about. We're going to talk more about this because I'm going to just kind of highlight, because I wanted to really focus more on the boundaries today. We're going to get into some more codependency, and we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow as well. Excuse me, because I think it's big enough that we need to really lean in. So codependency, here's what I want you to think about it. It often involves placing a lower priority on your own needs while being excessively preoccupied with the needs of others. So think about it. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your kids, maybe it's whatever. When you are constantly self-sacrificing your own needs and are excessively focused on the needs of others, you are creating that codependent relationship between you and that other entity or other person. And I want you to think about that, especially women who have this need to be self-sacrificing all the time. There is a codependency in what you get back in terms of how people revere you, how they put you on a pedestal, how you get to be superwoman, how you get to be in a space to be idolized, and oh, you're like super mom and you're whatever. There is a codependent thread in that because you are relying too much on external validation and praise, and this self-sacrificing need that puts you into almost that martyr capacity, that you're feeding off that because you think and believe that that has anything to do with your self-worth. You are allowing yourself to go outside of yourself. Anytime you're going outside of yourself to draw from other people, to have other people validate you, to have other people accept you, to have other people praise and worship and idolize you. Know that there is a thread of codependency in there. And this is why I want to have more of this conversation even tomorrow, because I'm going to plant some seeds to have you think about it. And so we think, oh, I'm giving. Actually, what you're doing is you're creating a codependent thread that says, as long as I sacrifice, as long as I keep giving, as long as I deplete and make it all about them, then I don't have to focus on me, which means you don't have effective boundaries, which means you aren't clear on your purpose and your why, which means you have a lack of self-worth, which says, I don't believe I'm worthy unless I'm giving to other people. And inside of that, there is an incredible codependent thread of allowing you to push your power out and making it be about someone else instead of standing in your power and serving from a place of knowing and deep resonance about who you are and what your purpose is and how you're here to serve. There's a difference in that. So I want you to think about that. If you're excessively preoccupied with other people and the needs of other people in a relationship that's sacrificing your own needs for your mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health, know that you are creating really deep codependent relationships because everything is outside of yourself. The other thing I want you to think about is you have a very deep difficulty in setting limits when you're creating those codependent links. And then your sense of purpose is derived from making extreme sacrifices to satisfy the needs of others. And I want you to think about 4 places where typically these kinds of sacrifices, these kinds of codependent relationships show up. I mean, and they can be with people or things, but I want you to think about it's in the physical realm. Actually, it's 5 spaces: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and in how you're using your time and your calendar. And I want you to think about, some of you have an extremely codependent relationship with your calendar. The more jammed up, the more busy, the more you get to say, oh my God, I don't even have a moment to breathe. I can't pee. I can't do anything. Look at me. There is a codependency in that because you are screaming for other people to validate your self-sacrificing ways as a determinant and qualifier for your own self-worth. And so I want you to think about that for a moment. And I know I'm getting really fired up this morning because this is a space where I feel like we get into that space that we think we're self-sacrificing, we're so giving, we're this altruistic, loving, kind, yes, and at what expense? It is costing your own health in the areas of mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and how you're managing your focus and your impact. All of those areas are spaces where you've created codependent relationships. And I will tell you, on fire, there you go, yes. Wow, such an amazing, powerful share. Awesome, I love that. So no apologies, no exceptions. So I want you to think about where in your life, and it doesn't have to be with other people. It can be with other people's opinions of you. It can be with other people's validation of you. It can be with how busy you are, how self-sacrificing you feel you need to be. It can be with you playing the martyr. It can be with you not managing your calendar effectively and letting your calendar control your life. All of those are codependent relationships. All of those are allowing you to shift your power to let something else decide for you, and you are not creating very clear limits and edges around what's okay for you and what's safe for you and what's not. And so I want you to think about that for a minute. Herbie, there's the key. Extreme sacrifices. Yes, that excessively extreme space of being only focused on others' needs and only in a capacity where you are sacrificing at all costs. An incredible sign of where you have codependent relationships. I think I'm really selfish about me and my needs. Awesome. And I'm going to tell you that you're not being selfish. I want you to think about the word mindful with F-U-L-L, which is like you're full of your own self, your ego, versus mindful, which is M-I-N-D-F-U-L, which means you're allowing yourself to feed what you need to be mindful, to be present. Same things with self-full, which is more of that selfish space, that self, I'm full of self, versus self-full, which means I am filling my cup, creating the boundaries I need, creating the edges and the lines so that I can effectively serve the people I'm here to serve and stop over-sacrificing at the cost of my own health and wellness in all those capacities. I'm starting to get clearer so that I can actually serve more. The more, and I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. We were talking about, last night, about sometimes, I was on my Yes Monthly call, and we were talking about how you have that guilt sometimes, or how you have that space where you are, serving, and you feel like, that self-care is kind of guilty. When here's the thing, the bigger the serve, the more space and self-care and rest and recharge you actually need. So the bigger, I want you to think about that, and that just dropped in, so that's going to be a new quote for me. The bigger the serve, the bigger the impact, the bigger the ability to put yourself out there, the more space you need to create for rest, recharge, retreat, which means to leave the world, to allow yourself to replenish, to repair, to recharge, to restore. So the bigger the serve, the bigger the space required in between. And so it's that breath, the space in between two breaths, right? The exhale, pushing out, helping, serving, and the inhale for taking what you need. You need to create even bigger space inside of that for your own self-care, for your own ability. Hello, Ruben. For your own ability to step forward and serve in the capacity that you were designed to serve. It's not about being excessively self-sacrificing. It's not to say that you won't sacrifice. It's to say it's not to be excessive in that space or exclusive to where it's only about others' needs. You need to fill your cup and need to know what you need first. Me too. Absolutely love that. I am full of myself. I love that. Oh, you're so funny, Herbie. Yes, excellent reframe. Thank you, CD. You're welcome. So I want you to think about that. What boundaries do you need to create? And it might be that you need to get clear on your own self-worth and who you are first and why that matters for what boundaries you need. And like I said, I'm going to be announcing sometime next week, I'm going to do another live webinar, free webinar to talk about stop looking for your purpose and knowing that your purpose is right here and how to connect with that so that you can get into a space to better understand your why and what boundaries do you need. Start with the safety space first. Start with what you need to protect. Think about that. Protect your mental, your emotional, your physical, your spiritual health, and your time and focus so that you can be creating bigger impact. What is required for your own safety to protect that so that you are not over-sacrificing the ability to recharge, fill your cup, and take what you need to stand up and be the person that you were intended to be. So let's see, Terry, I'm just beginning to plan a retreat for women with teens to give them the opportunity to break the tether And care for themselves. Yes, this is all about untethering. This is about untethering from the stories we've told ourselves. This is all about untethering from, I need to play martyr. And moms are the worst at this in terms of, I need to sacrifice everything for my babies. And it's amazing to me. I get women that really, I know, sometimes want to punch me when they're like, my children are my first priority. And I said, that's your biggest missed opportunity. Because until you become your first priority, you are not serving your children in the capacity you think you are. You have to be able to make yourself your first priority. And if you're in a loving relationship that is the foundation for where your children came from, then the next priority needs to be you and your partner, you and your spouse. Because unless the foundation is whole, the house, which is the love that you create for your children, can never be in its entirety at the level that you want to be giving, at the level you want to be serving. You must be your first priority, and there is nothing selfish about that. That is a self-full space that says, I'm doing this in order to serve more. You can only put out that which you have replenished. You cannot give what has been depleted or been given away because you don't have clear boundaries and you're not taking care of yourself. And that space of untethering from negative energy, untethering from trying to control everything, untethering from, trying to protect your kids and put them in a bubble and God forbid they fail. They're going to fail. They're going to fall flat on their face. They have to do that because if you don't teach them and give them space to do that, they can never create their own boundaries for themselves. It's only when we allow ourselves to be in the arena and get our ass handed to us that we can allow ourselves to know what's safe for us and what boundaries. And it is kind to let your children fail because you let them decide what boundaries they need. You let them decide what is okay and what's safe for them. And when you put them in a protective bubble and you don't do that, you are not serving them. And that is just a hot button for me. And so Terry, I love that you're going to do that because it is a space to help people untether. Herbie, love you. Good luck. Have best wishes for your 8 a.m. Talk to you later. And damn you, Candy Barone. I got one of my hashtags. I love it. It's one for the week. An account. Terry, I know my why and think about my not why. The need for more and firmer boundaries beginning to merge. I love that. Candy, do you remember the coffee pot analogy you used? Holy crap. Do I remember the coffee pot? I use a lot of analogies, and I'm trying to think which one. You might have to remind me on that one, Yvette. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank. Terry, I want to know this. What did I use? God knows, I use so many analogies. Sometimes that one I'm drawing a blank on. Yes, please let your children fail. Amen, absolutely. And Yvette, while you're shedding some light on my coffee pot analogy, I hope, I'm going to read the quote again from Brene Brown because I want you to think about this. I also want you to go look at, I'm inviting you to go watch the interview on Living Brave that Brene Brown does with Oprah Winfrey. It's 20 minutes long. It's extremely powerful. It's wide open, vulnerable, and it talks about how to create these boundaries and what they've learned in that space. But Brene Brown says, daring, this is that brave space. Daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And like I said in that episode with Brene Brown and Oprah, they talk about that you absolutely will disappoint people. It's the same thing about when you get in the arena, you're going to get your ass kicked. You're going to get it handed to you. You're going to fail. Not you might fail. You are going to absolutely fail. And you are absolutely going to disappoint people, and that's okay. Because some of those people it might be time for you to create boundaries where they're not in your life. Some of those people, it's about creating boundaries so that you can help them create boundaries for themselves. And for some of those other people, it's, you know what, there needs to be a container for how you can play with them or not. And so Terry, Yvette, is it the one about adding cream that is sweet? Oh yeah, not poison your cup. Oh yeah, I remember that coffee one too, right? Yeah, so think about it. Who are you letting put the cream in your coffee? I don't know if that's the one you're talking about. That's the one that Terry just fired up. Think about that. I'm very clear about how I like my coffee. I'm also really clear about who I trust to make my coffee. I don't even like coffee that much, even though I drink it. Are you going to allow somebody because here's the thing. How do you know if somebody's putting creamer in your coffee or lacing it with arsenic and poison? Be really mindful about who you're letting mix your coffee, who you're letting pour your coffee, right? And so let's see, Yvette, if we don't take care of ourselves and put ourselves first, all that's left over is oh yeah, I actually do that as the coffee pot or the sludge in the well, right? So think about, haha, it stuck with me. Yes, paraphrasing, and I actually do that more as the well. So when you think about a well of water that when it's fresh and you know the pumps are going and it's replenishing, it's clean and the water is good and it's overflowing, and you get, now imagine when the well starts to go dry, or the coffee pot. Think about if you've got the coffee pot that, you know, the coffee's gone down, everybody's poured out of it, and now all that's left. Think about when you get that last, if you've got a big coffee pot, and you've ever been the person at work or whatever, and you're the last person that gets whatever remnants is in the bottom of that. It's all the coffee what the hell they're called, the granular stuff. Man, my brain doesn't work sometimes. So it's the residual crap on the bottom, right? Or if you let it sit long enough and it's just that little sliver, it starts to be this sludge. And what happens if you don't replenish and make a new pot of coffee, or if you don't have the well working and the water's going down, it starts to create layers of mold and slime and sludge. And what happens is we take the top layer off, we give that to our clients or our community, and we pour out of that. Then what happens next is we give it to our friends, right? Then what happens is what's left on the bottom is what we start scraping out and handing over to our family, and we say, this is, I love you, drink up. Or what's worse is at the very bottom, that's what we like literally dig out, throw in our cup, throw a little creamer in there, and that's what we take for ourselves. And what happens is when we're not putting a new pot of coffee on, or we're not replenishing and letting the water flow in the well, what happens is we create this stagnant sludge is what we're serving to everyone. And so thank you, Yvette, for that. So yes, well, however you want to think about it, coffee sludge or well sludge, either way, it's disgusting, it's gross, and it's toxic. Stop handing that stuff out as a token of your love and appreciation, especially to yourself and the people that you love most in your life. Start taking time. Again, I'm going to say this, the bigger the serve, the bigger the level of impact, the bigger the space for self-care, for rest, recharge, restore that is required as a result. That means if you're giving 2 days for a workshop, you need to take at least 2 days for yourself to recharge and not be sacrificing and serving in a continued capacity. The bigger the serve, the bigger the space required. And I want you to think about that. Oh, that's a good one. Yes. Are you living well or like a well? Ooh, I got to steal that one, Carol. I love that. Ooh, are you living well or like a well, like a dried up well? Ooh, I love that. I'm going to borrow that one. That is excellent. No, but I like that. Excellent. Happy to help. Awesome. You guys are amazing. Thank you for some of you newbies that jumped on this morning. Like I said, I want to come back. We're going to have some more conversation about codependency, empathy inside this space, talking about boundaries. We can't talk about it enough. It is a space we all have opportunity to learn, myself included. As much as I've done this work and I've gotten very clear on some non-negotiables and boundaries, there are always new ones that pop up that I'm like, ooh, I think I need to create a little line or edge for that right now. That is not working for me anymore. And I mentioned this last night on our Yes Monthly Q&A. I want you to realize that your story that got you here doesn't need to be your story moving you forward. So I also want you to think about the fact that sometimes the reason why we're not getting our next enlightenment is because we're still hung up on the previous enlightenment or the awakening. So just because this story got you to this plateau on this summit where you're at, if you want the next climb, that might not be the story that needs to carry you forward, which is the same thing for your boundaries. So I want you to think about your boundaries that got you here. While they still might be boundaries you need, you may need new boundaries based on how you're growing, what you're looking for, and to climb your next summit. So with that, everybody, I got a little fired up as always, and love the conversation, love your contributions. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I want you to think about where and how you need to create effective boundaries for yourself. Where there might be, get honest with yourself. Where might you have some codependency that needs to get cleaned up, that you need to reclaim your power back, and understand if you're excessively self-sacrificing in ways that's depleting you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, or in the way you're spending your time. So with that, everyone, I love you. Have a fantastic and phenomenal Tuesday. I'll be back here tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. Central Time. Can't wait to see you. Bye. Happy Tuesday.